Ahoy! Joe Buddy Hambone here, and I'm back again with a brand new coupon code from our friends over at Noble Knight Games. This month, the code is RPG City, and it's good for 10% off orders of $10 or more, running now through Saturday, July 31st. You heard that right, folks. There's plenty of time to cash in this code, RPG City, at Noble Knight Games for 10% off orders of $10 or more, because this promo is running until July 31st. Never been a better time to get back to gaming with your friends. New games, old games, whatever you're looking for, Noble Knight has it, and they're ready to part with it and add it to your collection. So don't forget, when you're checking out at Noble Knight Games, online or in person, RPG City is the code for 10% off orders of $10 or more, running now through Saturday, July 31st. From our friends over at Noble Knight Games.
This is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse, hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the founder and publisher of Unwinnable. He's going to talk today about a book that's definitely less volumes than the Encyclopedia Britannica, Stu Horvath.
It's true, but it still has encyclopedia in the name.
It's very true. Quick sidebar before we actually get into the topic. Did you ever know anyone growing up who actually had a set of Encyclopedia Britannicas?
Are you going to be shocked and surprised when I say me?
Oh, shit, really?
Yeah.
I've never met anyone until now that had a full set of Encyclopedia Britannica books. Otherwise, just any set of Encyclopedia Britannica books. Like, I had the World Book Encyclopedia. That's what we had when I was a kid. And, you know, I guess it was just the neighborhood because other kids in the neighborhood also had the World Book Encyclopedia. And now that makes sense. Traveling book salesman.
Book salesman, yeah. They did actually used to go door to door.
I mean, I've been in sales my whole life, and that sounds like hell on earth to me. Well, Stu, today we're going to talk about the Encyclopedia Magica, right?
Yep.
So why don't you tell our listeners what the Encyclopedia Magica is?
We're talking about doing an episode tonight. I was just like, well, you know, I kind of bagged on D&D a little bit last week, talking about my book. And, you know, maybe we just got to do a little mea culpa and talk about one of my favorite Dungeons & Dragons books, just to prove that, you know, the love is still there.
Oh, we're doing a fan episode? Nice.
I mean, yeah, I do this thing where like everything's my favorite. You know, the book that I'm talking about right now, that's my favorite book of all time.
Right.
So like, you know, take that with a grain of salt. But the Encyclopedia Magica is seriously one of my favorite, if not my favorite, second edition D&D books.
It's your favorite edition. So right off the bat, I know we're ahead.
The thing that people kind of don't understand when they bash second edition is that second edition is first edition. Unlike third, fourth, and fifth edition, first and second edition are completely compatible. The only thing that pissed people off was that they took stuff out that they felt should remain in. But the truth is that you could always go back to those older books and just use the barbarian class or the assassin class or the half-orc race, or throw those, you know, monster manual demons on in, and they'll work just as fine as all the other second edition stuff. Which I think is testament to like the awesomeness of second edition, is that it's like new and fancy, but it's also totally compatible. So the cool thing about the Encyclopedia Magica is that it takes everything, every single magic item from 1974 to 1993 when the first volume comes out. It comes out in December of 1993. There's 3 more volumes that come out over the course of 1994, and it gets logged as 1994. But that first one came out in 93. December of 93 is the cutoff point. So you have almost 20 years of magic items across 3 different versions of D&D, all in this book.
Wow, that is an unprecedented level of reverse compatibility. I mean, that would be like the GameCube being able to play like 8-bit Nintendo games.
Yeah, it's not just the stuff that's in the rule books too. It takes everything that was in the Strategic Review and Dragon Magazine and Dungeon Magazine too.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think that like stuff that was in the RPGA stuff, anything that was officially produced by TSR that had a magic item in it, that magic item is in the Encyclopedia Magica.
That is so incredibly valuable.
Right? And it's not just the stats. it's every bit of information that went along with it. So like when Dragon Magazine 173 comes out and they have that fantastic bag of beans table, that's in there.
No, that's the best.
Yeah.
That's the best.
It has all the different variants of the deck of many things. I have such a hard time looking through these old books for D&D. Like they're not great reference books. I have the ability to look through, like I have a decent PDF library that, I could do digital searching, and I still can't find things.
Oh, yeah.
Like I can't imagine having to go through like print archives at TSR to put together an exhaustive list and crunch all of that text into 4 beautiful reference books.
See, something like that is so appealing to me, especially, pre-internet, pre-PDF, like having that as a dungeon master. I mean, for me, especially because I would love to just sit there and just like have a drink and read the book and find something in there that I can just turn the game on its ear with.
Yeah.
Something that, as a dungeon master, you're putting in there as just a little bit of chaos or just enough to get your players on their heels and let them respond to it and let them react to it. Like that kind of thing is like super cool. That's like why whenever I get a new book, the first thing I do is I look at spells, I look at the weapons, I look at like cool things that I want my players to be able to find in the dungeons, in the forest, wherever they are in whatever game. So I think that's actually pretty cool. I mean, when I started playing D&D with you, there was the D&D Insider, right?
Yeah.
And you could get access to a lot of this stuff over the internet, but you had to have a pay subscription to it. You also needed to know where to look. And that's the thing I think as a society we kind of take for granted, because sure, Google is great, or whatever browser that you use, whatever search engine that you're using is awesome, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't know what you're looking for.
That's true.
So a book like the Encyclopedia Magica, at least if you don't know what you're looking for, you have it in your hands and you're going to be able to find it just by skimming through. And if not, you might find something else that's pretty cool too.
Yeah. That book totally lit my hair on fire when I got it back in the 90s. Like it changed the way I wanted to DM, because I wanted the players to find these cool ass weird, like you got to understand, like the level of quality across all of these items is not consistent.
No.
Some are ridiculous, some are silly, some are goofy, and you kind of get like the whole range of D&D tones through their magic items. And that's beautiful, because like I think that it encourages you to incorporate a whole bunch of different types of tones in your game, and that is sort of like surprising. One of my favorite things was always to give somebody a singing skull.
Yeah, it was.
Just because like it lets you play like a silly song when they sing, and I forget what the spell effects are, but like it's just one of my quirky things that I like to do. It made me want to write my scenarios, like, because I wanted to like get all of these things in there and like let them find them and then like see what they would do with them. Because like that's what the best part of magic items is that they sort of break the game in ways that encourage your characters to build and mess around with the world, to contribute to the world. That's sort of like the best thing about magic items in the earlier editions. And I think that's sort of one of the things that I personally find lacking, is that most of the magic items are really, from 3rd edition on, kind of like they're really just buffs, or they have really kind of like mechanical applications, because the games are so balanced. They don't want magic items to break anything, so that they kind of lose their magic. To me, I feel like all of the magic items in the encyclopedia, it's just like the sky's the limit. Everything is so weird, so off the wall. There's very little concern about balance and like breaking your game. It's just like, give this stuff to your players and have fun. And there's a unified table in the back. I mean, it is an encyclopedia, but it's all on a random table. It's like multiple pages, because 4 volumes. So you can still roll randomly for this stuff, which is,
I love it.
So good. Love a random table.
I think there's nothing better than a random table, and that's one of the things that I got from playing D&D with you, is rolling for treasure.
Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't always work. And I've learned the hard way, because I'm a very generous DM, that you never let your players get a ring of wishing, a hammer of thunderbolts, or like there's several other items that I would never, ever let a player get. Because, there is something fun about a magic item that does break the game, and not so much break the game in the long term, but just in the moment.
Yeah.
because there's always the scramble for it, and there's usually consequences to getting it. But there is no fun in actually having a magic item like a Ring of Wishing that absolutely breaks every game. It just doesn't work right. And, there's a lot to be said about finding the balance between like classic style magic items, which were scenario breaking more than game breaking in a lot of ways, versus a lot of magic items now are very flat, if
Yep.
that makes sense to you. It's very, very muted in tone as far as what they can do and what you can do with them. However, there's always that one player that no matter how muted a magic item is, they will find a way to completely exploit that magic item. And sometimes it has some unforeseen consequences. So, say, for instance, I had a player recently who got a bead of force, right? And I had him roll to see how many beads of force that he would find, and he got 4. And so, before I could say anything else, he's like, and I shove it up my butt. And what do you do with something like that? So I was like, okay. And I rolled the dice for it, and he exploded, because sometimes there's the letter of the magic item, and then there's the spirit of the magic item. So it's a fine line. You're always going to walk as a dungeon master, a GM, keeper of secrets, or anything else in any game, is just, finding a way to balance it out. But having the ability to have such great and easy access to it, and have access that will run over multiple editions, that's cool, man. That's awesome.
One of the things that I think is just so fantastic about it is that they're not the same size as the rest of the books on your shelf. They're more of a digest size. And that kind of made them feel special in a way that's hard to quantify. Because, like, at that point, I can't think of a single Dungeons and Dragons book that was that small aside of the original booklets. That kind of has like a faux leatherette thing that's pretty cool. I should mention Arnie Sweckel does almost all of the incidental art, and then they have color plates that are drawn from previous publications. But Arnie is a fantastic artist, like real kind of like pointy heavy metal kind of vibe to him that I really appreciate, and that gave everything like a little bit of a new twist, seeing it in the encyclopedia, which was cool. I should also mention that it apparently has everything but one magic item. One magic item slipped the
What's it missing?
There. The first edition version of the Flail of Yinagu.
I have no idea what that is. I'm not even going to try to pretend and be clever. What is it?
He's the demon lord of Knowles. So like all the deities and demigods, and I guess the monster manual, the divine sort of characters all had like their special, like Marduk has like his crazy trident or whatever. Odin has his spear. Orcus has his wand. Yinagu has a flail. He's like the demon lord of Knowles.
So it's missing just one item. Do you think this is an oversight, or do you think, wow, we actually don't have room for it?
I think that it was an oversight, and I think it might have been an oversight where they were just like, who cares? Like, I'm pretty sure that there's a second edition version of it that was probably listed too. That's how thorough it was. Like, if, Odin's spear has like however many iterations of that over the course of the game, to that point, every single one, as long as they were different, would be in there. So, I mean, it might have just been a matter of like, oops, we forgot it. And well, we're not going to sweat it because it's basically the same as this other version. So
yeah, and how could they have any idea that like 28 years later there would be a thing called a podcast where people would narc them out and be like, they missed something? Ha!
Yeah, fair's fair. I should give credit. Kevin Culp, the administrator of EN World, who did the product history for the Encyclopedia Magica on Drive-Thru RPG, is the one who caught that, or at least he's the one who wrote about it. I don't know if he caught it, but I wouldn't know about it if he hadn't written that. So there you go, Kevin Culp.
Well, now more people know about it because of our listenership. So tell your friends, dear listener. So, Stu, do you have a favorite magic item from the Encyclopedia Magical?
I mean, it's the bag of beans.
It had to be. It's mine too.
As much as I hate that magic item, I love that magic item.
Well, it's to me the one magic item that in any edition, this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about, where it breaks the scenario but won't break the game.
Yeah.
And if you let your players have fun with it, it gets real weird.
Yeah. And runner up is Deck of Many Things. The variants of those are just fantastic. But like that one is more of a game breaker because it plays on your player's natural sense of greed and power hungry lust. There's like, I don't know, maybe 3 good cards
Yeah, and I've definitely seen the Deck of Many Things take the wind out of the sails of many a player who had become OP because they munchkined their character. And you had these moments where you're like, well, there's nothing that's going to happen. And the game becomes unfun because this person is never going to get killed or take any damage, or they're killing everything and no one's having a good time. And then the DM puts out the Deck of Many Things.
There is a great dungeon scenario. I forget what issue it's in. It's the cover, though, that has like death from the Deck of Many Things on it. So like you could look for that cover. And it's a dungeon in which each room's door is sealed with one of the cards from a Deck of Many Things. So you have to open the doors. You have to pick up the card and come what may.
I love it.
It's very, very good.
That got me all DM hot and bothered. Yeah.
And because they were kind writers, you know, the really, really bad ones, like you just have to push on to the end, and then there's sort of like a reset button, you know, so you could get your friend back who fell into the void and stuff like that.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
And just so everyone knows, the director's cut of my story is I did let my friend live after he blew himself up. I just would not let him have beads of force anymore. You F around, you find out, people.
I mean, he deserved that. Like, and he does that all the time.
But it's the best because players like that keep things interesting. Players like that keep the game moving, especially when you get to higher levels and your players are suddenly like, I don't know, I don't want to die. And you're like, you guys are like 9th, 10th level. Just walk through the door. One of you has to walk through the door. And then there's wandering monsters because people don't want to walk through the door anymore. But that's neither here nor there. Stu, do you have any final thoughts on the Encyclopedia Magica?
My final thought is pick them up if you can find them. I don't think that they're terribly expensive, but every time I say that, somebody was listening to this podcast and jacks up the price on eBay, or I'm just flat wrong. Because everybody's sort of like people are just always like, dude, you say it's not expensive, and then everything's like $100. And I'm just like, that's way too expensive. Don't buy that. You know?
I mean, you could always join our Patreon and get into our patron only Discord, and feel free to ask Stu behind the scenes before he says it out loud. And then you run to Noble Knight Games. Cheap
This
plug.
is true.
Well, this has been another amazing episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. Stu, where can the people find you?
They can find me on Instagram at Vintage RPG, posting every day about role-playing books.
You could find me on Instagram at John McGuire RPG. I've been posting more. I sometimes go on Twitter. It's John McGuire RPG. You could follow me there, but I'm probably not going to be on there very much. You could also chat with me on our Discord. We have a killer Discord community. We've got an even better patron community for patreon.com/vintagerpg. We have a special channel just for the patrons. We've got early release episodes. We have a behind the scenes look at Stu's book, Experience Points. We have a behind the scenes look at my RPG, Rocket to Russia. And we also have early release episodes and some other cool things that we have on the horizon for our patrons, patreon.com/vintagerpg. Real quick, before I hit the go home, Stu, I was like, man, I wonder how much this thing actually is. So the first thing that pops up for a set of the Encyclopedia Magica is an Amazon link. Someone is selling the full set for $549.99. The header says imitation leather.
First rule of collecting is never click the Amazon link. That's always some squatter who's got
That's a trap.
Yeah, they're always overpriced. Don't ever trust that price.
So there you go, people. This is another awesome episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. For Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.